My name is R Gonzales. I was born in Houston, Texas. Lived on 2518 Canal Street, and my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents all lived in the same location at 2518 and 2520 Canal. I have my formal education at HISD, Houston Independent School District. I went to Lubbock Elementary. From Lubbock, went to Jackson Junior High. And after Jackson Junior High, I went to San Jacinto High School, where I graduated in 1966. I got married in 67, and I got drafted in 68. During my growing up years, my great-grandfather used to tell me stories. He was the oldest man in my family, and he was a blind man, and I was always the one that brought him cafecito con un pan de dulce, and he would tell me to sit down and talk to him. We already knew who we were even though he couldn't see me, but I could see him. And he would tell me stories about our ancestors. He would say that that we were from the Chuchimecas, and that he was a proud Native American, and that if it wasn't for the Spaniards that conquered Mexico, that we would probably be living a much better life. We have been native Texans before Texas was Texas. It was, of course, at that time, he would say that it was La Tierra de Aztlán, and I didn't know what all this meant because I was only like 8, 9 years old when he was telling me these stories. Elementary was predominantly Hispanics. There was maybe 2 white kids that I could remember in the whole school. At the beginning, there was more, but as I graduated from elementary, there was less white kids in the school. And when I got to Jackson Junior High, that's when I began to experience the racial conflicts between the Hispanics and the white Anglo-Saxon kids. We had fights after school, we had fights during lunch, we had fights during, between classes in the hallways. It was always between a Chicano and a Gabacho, which at that time, that's how we referred to each other. When I got to high school, the fights were less, but the discrimination was still there. Segregation between Hispanics and whites were, lunchrooms were, the same lunchroom, but, we would separate, they would segregate each other. I have to mention that when I went to high school, there was no black kids in our schools. The black kids had their own schools, which I thought was great for them because they didn't have to deal with the white kids. But when I got back from Vietnam, I realized that the schools were integrated and that the whites, the Mexican Americans, and the blacks were all in the same schools from elementary on up. When I was growing up, my grandfather used to sell. He used to take me with him to go sell secondhand clothes to cotton pickers who were mainly Hispanic. They were Chicanos, and they were cotton pickers. They were picking cotton in little cotton picking towns like Rosenberg, Richmond, El Campo, Wharton. We went as far as Austin, and he had a panel truck, and he would load it up with all the used clothes like yompas and blue jeans and shoes, and we would go and set up, open up the doors on the van, on the panel truck, and set up all the goods, all the clothing out there, and people would come from the trucks after picking cotton, and they would get paid, and then they would come to us and buy clothes that they needed to go back out to the fields. And my grandfather used to serve that clientele. all of them were Mexicanos. And my grandfather was a big influence in my life. And after we would sell clothes during the day, he would go and into the cantinas, and he had a three-man conjunto, and he would play the guitar, and there's a man that Mr. Bastida, he used to play the violin, and there was another man, I think his name was Chano, and he used to play the accordion. They wouldn't come to sell with us, but they would meet us at the bar or at the dance hall, and my grandfather and his two buddies, two friends would set up at the corner, and they would start playing the music. People start dancing and having a merry time, a good old time. And then there was a time when he wanted to teach me how to play the guitar, and he realized that I couldn't move my fingers like I'm supposed to move my fingers to play the guitar. You know, they just don't do the right thing. So all my cousins, my uncles, all of them played the guitar. They all play music. They're all in bands and conjuntos, and except me. So my grandfather realized that he couldn't teach me how to play the guitar. So he bought me my first set of paint and oil brushes. And he gave me a kit that was by the numbers. And I started painting by the numbers, and I painted several, fruit kind of paintings in oil. And that was what captured my attention. And I was good at it, and I continued with it because I really enjoyed it. For me, it was, I found what I really loved to do, and that I was about 9 years old. And so from then on, I've been drawn to visual things, paintings and photography and videography and all of the stuff that's today art. My first paintings were by the numbers, which my grandfather bought me, and I taught myself, how to look for lights and darks by painting by the numbers. Then in elementary, one of my teachers in the third grade, and that continued on to the fourth and the fifth and the sixth grade when I graduated, they would use me to decorate the scenery in the auditorium for the plays that they were going to have for the parents on parent PTO night, which is parent teacher night. And because they were allowing me to paint these paintings on butcher paper that they would hang up as the scenery, I would paint trees and skies and hills and everything that they needed for either the play was either something about Little Red Riding Hood or Cinderella or whatever it was. I would paint the background, and so I got more experience, and in fact I became more confident in what I was doing. And one of my teachers, my sixth grade teacher, when I was graduating, suggested that when I got to Jackson to go into the arts. They didn't have, at junior high, they didn't have an art class that I could go into because they were full. So the next best thing that they offered me was mechanical drawing. And so I took mechanical drawing, but I was good at it, but it wasn't really what I really loved. But I stayed in the class, and I did my homework, and I did all my structural kind of drawing with the T-square and triangle and that sort of thing. And that professor told me when I got to high school, he suggested that I try to go into architectural school. at San Jacinto. So when I got to San Jacinto and I applied for architectural, the counselor told me that those classes were full and that I couldn't get in those classes. So I asked for some kind of a art or photography, and they told me all those classes were full. The only thing that was open and available to me was air conditioning and refrigeration, and I was really disappointed. I took the classes and I learned about air conditioning and refrigeration, and I even worked in it for a couple of years after high school to earn a living, um, but I wasn't passionate about it. And I didn't have much time to think about it because I just got married and I wanted to make a living. But then the draft got me, and of course I got drafted, went into the Army, and found myself in Vietnam. After Vietnam, I came home, and I had an opportunity to go to the University of Houston under the GI Bill, and the GI Bill paid for my education at the University of Houston. And I don't mind saying this, but it was like $50 a semester and $50 worth of books and materials. I had found myself painting, doing life painting classes, life drawing. I was taking lithography, etching, engraving, lithography, and we did a little bit of photography, but I was really drawn to the arts, the physical, crafty arts. When it got close to me graduating, I knew that I had to do a graduating thesis because all the art students had to produce one on the last year. So I approached the dean, Dr. Gunther at the time, the dean of the art department, and proposed the idea of a mural. He had no idea what I was going to paint. I was just proposing an idea about painting a mural somewhere on campus. I had the idea of this wall, but I didn't tell him where I was going to paint it. I just wanted to know if I could do that and get credit for a graduating thesis. He was enthusiastic about it, and he told me to go ahead and get it done. But I didn't get any credit. And that's another story. The Houston art scene in my lifetime has really grown. When I first graduated, I went out and sought work as an artist, and it was very difficult for me to land a job as an artist. I looked at being in the commercial art aspect of it as a commercial artist, working for an advertising firm, but all the advertising firms in town, they didn't hire me. Bottom line, you know, I interviewed and I took my portfolio in, and they looked at it, but they didn't hire me. Right about our graduation year, I remember some of the professors recommending some of our students to agencies, art agencies in town, and they would get the job. Most of them were white Anglo kids, because in the art department there was 3 Chicanos that I knew of, and you know, I didn't get recommended for anything by my professors. I had to go and knock on the doors after graduation because I knew, I overheard my professor tell a student, a colleague, you know, where to go and get that job. So I would attempt to go to those places that I would overhear my professor suggest to another student, and I'd apply there. But I never got into the art world, and I didn't get into any of the galleries. I went to galleries, took my paintings, but they wouldn't exhibit my work. They said that my work was not what they were looking for, and so I would eventually I started looking elsewhere for work, and I found a job as a salesman. Well, actually, I began that job as a layout person who I laid out signs and drew signs for a liquor company. Um, that liquor company later um, gave me a promotion after I asked, to be promoted because I wanted to make more money. And the sign making for them was not, there was a ceiling and I wasn't going to go anywhere. And I knew that the salesmen were on commission and they were making a lot more money than I was. And I was doing their signs and I was doing all their work. So I figured, why not get that job? So I got promoted, but it was not in the art department. It was as a salesman. And there again, I was frustrated with the steering wheel in my hand instead of brushes in my hand. I think it was 1974. I was involved with a group in San Antonio. It was called La Galería de la Raza. And this man, I forgot his name, but it's been a lot of years, but he was backing it up with a building and the money to fix the building because it was an old building. We went in and gutted it and put in new electricity so that we could have lights for our paintings, and we redid the walls with sheetrock and painted them. I had my paintings exhibited there, hoping to sell some of my work. And at opening night, we had a lot of prospective buyers, and a doctor was very interested in my work, and he told me that he was going, to buy my work. I went back 30 days later and found my work in the attic, and none of it was sold. The people in charge, obviously, they didn't, for some reason, promote my work. They were also artists, so I got the feeling that they were promoting their work and their friends' work, and because I was a Houstonian, an outsider in San Antonio, that they were probably not willing to promote my work. A lot of the Latino art today, I see them doing work that is representative, like Peter Max. It's work with letters, It's work not really relevant to what I believe a mural work should represent. I studied art at the University of Houston with a well-known Mexican muralist, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and he taught me that art is for the public. And if you're going to paint a mural, that it should be politically motivated to represent what is the best for the people in that community. And what I see today is kind of the opposite of that. It's like artists don't want to go political. Artists don't want to paint about what's happening in politics or in the world, or what happened in the past or in history. They are painting graphics. They're painting things that are aesthetically pleasing, but there is no history. There's no identity to credit our ancestors. It's all about modern art For me, the most significant moment was painting La Marcha por la Humanidad. Um, there was so many stories that I can tell about painting this mural. There was a story about, well, the University of Houston and the art department. I proposed the mural to Dr. Gunther, and he thought it was a great idea, and he said, get it done. And when I got it done, went back to him, he said, we can't give you credit for it, because what they did after I painted this mural is they made it a policy that art students no longer had to do an art thesis. And up to today, I think it remains that way. What happened after I painted the wall and I sat over here and watched all the students coming in and looking at the wall, there was a feeling of resentment on the part of the viewer, and most of the viewers were white Anglo-Saxon kids, students, and they looked at the wall and they didn't know who I was sitting right there, but I could hear every word they were saying, and they just did not understand what was on the wall. But they took offense to the Lady of Justice in a negligee, in a prostitutal form, and they took offense to Uncle Sam because he's a skeletal form, and they took offense to the whole mural as a whole because of those two things. They didn't understand any part of it, and they didn't want to, but they made their opinions heard loud, and they said, in so many words, whoever painted this should go back to Mexico if they don't like America. Can you understand that I fought for America at the Vietnam War? I am more patriotic than any of those students that came through the doors in September of 1973. They were all draft dodgers. As far as I'm concerned, they didn't want to go to the war, and so they protested against the war so they wouldn't have to go. Regardless of what the political content of the war was or ended to be, or whatever, I did not run to Mexico. I did not run to Canada. I went into the Army because I was drafted, and I fulfilled my commitment to my country and God. Right now I'm involved with Magnolia Galleries, the YWCA on navigation. They are actually sponsoring art events, and I like that they have a group of people that are dedicated to Chicano art, and they're willing to exhibit it, and they have people that come and they view the art, and some of them buy the art. And so to me that is a good outlet, and I wish there was more. I really wish that Houston had a bigger venue to exhibit more Chicano art or Mexican American art. I believe there's enough Mexican Americans, Chicanos in the United States and in Houston alone that we could fill a museum. I think the Chicanos, there's enough of us that we should have our own Chicano cultural of our art museum, and I think that some of us are working on that, and it may be a reality within the next few years, hopefully sooner than that.